All right, welcome back to the Spartacus Project, everybody. We talked some good arm wrestling last week, a couple other racy topics, but we got so heated in the Chicks with Dicks conversation that I forgot to mention the match I wanted to talk about the most, and it was Evgeny or Evgeny. I'll call him Evgeny Prudnik against Todzilla Todd Hutchings. And I think this is a great match. I think it would be an even more interesting match if Prudnik was Big Prudnik, big, saucy, juiced up Prudnik that was going against Devin and those guys. His last match, he looked a little deflated because he had to make a weight class and he had a bad showing. And I think Todd Hutchins is probably going to run him over. I hope that he does. But Evgeny's super versatile. He can pull anywhere. He can pull in a hook.
Mm-hmm.
He can top roll. He can press. Todd Hutchins goes one way. It's one way traffic with him, and you know where he's going, and it's super strong.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm rooting for Todzilla. I think Todzilla is going to get it. He's looked amazing the past 2 years straight. He's just going to kill her. What do you think about that match, Chris?
Yeah, what is he now? 55?
Gotta
53?
be.
Yeah, no, he's like 57, I think. Fuck. I don't know, man. Like, what's the weight? Are they both coming in at a certain weight?
I think it's 220. I'll double check, but I believe it's 220.
Oh, if it's 220, I like Todd. Uh, I like Todd. I mean, Evgeny is so versatile, right? He's got so much stamina. He's got defense. He's got attack. But Todd has that wild card, and at that weight, I, it'll be long matches, right? Nothing will be quick, but I got to favor Todd.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to be long matches, man. Prudnik, when he has to make weight compared to when he didn't, looks like a totally different guy. Sorry, I'm just trying to look it up right now to make
Mm-hmm.
sure. I'm 99% sure that it's a 220 or whatever the fucking kilograms are of
100. It would be 100.
yeah. So I think it's 220 or 225 or something like that. Um, but either way, it's a it's a great match either way, and I think this because there's two matches. There's this one, Prudnik and Hutchings, and then there's
Mm-hmm.
Rustam and Paul Lynn, which we talked about last week.
Yeah.
I think the winners of those matches should pull each other, and the loser of those matches should pull each other. Because I think all four of those guys need to, and even if Paul Lynn and Todd Hutchings both win, I'd still like to see them pull. But and as much as I love Paul Lynn and hope that he wins, I think Rustam's going to take him, and I think Todd
Mm-hmm.
Hutchings is going to take Prudnik, and I want to see the Rustam versus Todd Hutchings rematch. So I hope they either both win or
Yeah.
both lose, and then they pull each other.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be great. Todd and Rustam would even be a better matchup theoretically than him and Prudnik because of, um, Prudnik can, if he's heavy and is capable of bending back Todd's wrist, and not and keeping Todd away from really his. Todd can pull in any position and he can pull incredibly well to the side with a bent wrist. But I don't think Rustam has that with his smaller hand has that capability. So with Rustam and Todd, it's going to go inside hard. Um, Evgeny's got an ability to go outside a bit more and be a little bit more tactical with his longer levers. But yeah, all those four guys, like you said, which way it rolls anyway. Those are exciting matchups
Yeah, and
either way.
I think all four of them have enough respect with Ingen and the arm wrestling community where even off of a loss, they can still pull another big name. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
losing to Rustam or losing to Prudnik or losing to Todd or losing to Paul Lynn knocks you down at all when you start mixing it up with the highest level guys. And do you remember Rustam and Todd Hutchings pulled? It was almost like 10 years ago. I want to say it was
Yeah,
2017. And Rustam basically just flatlined him
yeah,
inside in a hook, took him over. And I think Todd Hutchings has leveled up a lot since then. I don't know if it's
yeah,
just his consistent one way training where he doesn't give a
yeah,
fuck about top roll. I think he gets Rustam in a rematch. So I really hope for that for him. I
yeah,
want Todd Hutchings to get that rematch. I think it'd be great.
yeah, yeah. He despite his age, he's evolved, and Rustam has. You got to believe he's not that guy anymore. He's still effective and he can easily beat anyone in the world under 200, but I don't believe he's as formidable as he was 10 years ago. Um, but so I think that match has a different result this time. But even the last time Todd and Prudnik pulled, Prudnik toyed with him, didn't he?
Yeah, but Prudnik, maybe I'm basing too much off of his last match, but he just got killed by Arachney, correct? That
Yeah.
was the last. Yeah, Arachney basically just fucked his world up. But maybe we're putting too. Maybe I'm putting too much hate on Prudnick and not enough shine on Arachney because Arachney the last year has looked ridiculous. He's kind of fucked up everybody. Todd Hutchings gave him some problems. John Brzezinski gave him some problems, and then it was like he just evolved from there. He hasn't looked compromised in a long time, so maybe Arachney just is on that level, and we're going to see him start taking off. He's been talked about as the future for a long time. Like people have because he trains with Levon. He's a young dude. He's got all these crazy bicep records. So maybe that's just maybe Prudnick just ran into him at his peak. But this match is going to tell you a lot. If Prudnick loses to Todd Hutchings and it doesn't look well, like let's say he takes Todd's wrist and still gets pressed down, and then he decides to go inside hook for hook and still loses, there's going to you're going to see Prudnick juice up real quick. He will not compete
Yeah.
at that lower weight class if he's getting eaten up like this by these top tier guys. Because Prudnick's one of those guys when he's sauced out at that he's like a smaller sauced out guy who can bang with big dudes.
Well, because he's 6'2", right? He's not a 5'9" guy.
No,
he's
he's
taller
tall
than
dude.
all of them. Yeah. But I mean, the guy I love, and I think I believe he's ranked number one on 200 is Sasho. I mean, he's who does any of those guys beat Sasho?
Yeah,
Sasho beat Paul Lynn. He beat Paul Lynn, right? And then he pulled. Who did he pull? He pulled.
He just took an L.
John. Did he really?
Yeah, he just lost, and I was shocked because I would have bet the farm on him. Who did he lose to? Sasha lost to Arachney 4-0. Arachney just fucked him up every round, and I think that's part of the rise of Arachney that we're talking about. So, like those other guys, like Prudnick, Paul Lynn, Todd Hutchings, Rustam, they might not beat Sasho, but they probably won't beat Arachney either. But Todd Hutchings has a win on Arachney, if I'm not mistaken. I think he beat Arachney, but Arachney seems next level. So, yeah, Sasho. I love Sasho. He's one of my favorite guys, but he's like 5'4", and
he's not 5'4". He's not 5'4".
What is he, 5'2"?
No, he's taller than that.
I don't think he is.
He doesn't use a riser. How can he be 5'4"?
He uses a riser a lot.
Oh, he does.
Yeah, okay. He uses yeah. Don't you remember RVJ making fun of him for using a riser against him?
Didn't he beat the shit out of RVJ? Didn't he kill RVJ?
Yeah, he fucked him up.
Jesus, what a stud!
RVJ blamed the juice, not the riser.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And the riser.
Yeah. A juiced 5'4" guy, yeah, with a hand with a hand that probably fits in the palm of RVJ's, but it's the juice that got him, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't matter that he's a hobbit; he's on the secret sauce. So
he's 5'4", 220. Or what does he walk around at?
No,
that's crazy.
He's under 2. He might be 5'5" or 5'6". He's short as fuck though, dude. He's real short. He made me look like a giant. I'm not tall. So, but
you've met him?
No, I've seen him walking around a lot. Like he's not very tall. He's the shortest guy that competes at that weight class, for sure.
For sure.
Which makes it even more impressive. His fingers are short, and he still sinks that hook. That kind of goes to show you that it's not all about the length of your hand when you're a hooker. It's your ability to manipulate the setup and get your palm right, and then
we can do a whole episode on the anatomy of how you'd ideally want to have a hooker built. And people would be shocked. Like, people think it's long arm, long form. It's really not long form or long upper arm. It's the ratio of one to the other. And one can make you a great top roller anatomically, or one can make you a great hooker. And the length of the hand is important in a top roll, but it's the width of the hand to stop pronation and therefore be a hooker. So people think hand size. Well, what do you mean? Are you talking length, width? Long arm, do you mean a long upper arm? Do you mean a long forearm? Like, it's a lot of times it's a ratio, but a long arm is not an advantage, and a long hand is not an advantage if you're looking to drive inside.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue too for this next thing I wanted to speak to you about. I'm sure you've seen the videos circulating around Facebook and YouTube and social media. Everyone seems to be doing the Devin Larratt like pronation lift, and 99% of the time it's just someone doing like a calf raise where they plant this on the knee and then calf raise up, and they count it as a lift. There's a million shitty lifts out there. If you had to pick 2 lifts, let's say, just two lifts, and you can break it down by style if you want. Two lifts for a hooker, two lifts for a top roller, just however you want to lay it out. Two lifts if you were training a specific person or yourself. What are two lifts you would do? And you can get deep into how you would do it, the angles, the geometry, because all of that matters. People see Devin Larratt do these lifts, or they see someone else do these lifts, and then they start replicating them. And even if the person who did it picture perfect, it's like when you whisper a secret to someone and they whisper it, by the time it gets to the end of the chain, it's bullshit. And you see these people posting videos of horrible form where it's not really doing anything. But what are two lifts you love, regardless of style?
Um, well, okay, so your go-to move, if you can only have one exercise for a style, right? That's what we're talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah, and you don't have to limit
Um,
yourself. You can break it
yeah.
down wherever you want. Like if you have two lifts for a hooker, two lifts for a top roller, whatever you want. What are your things you know work and how to do
So, so there was one exercise I did when I was in my apex, and that lift, and I did many lifts, but there was one lift that had a direct correlation to my performance, or I wouldn't say my performance because there's a lot of variables, but my strength at the table. When this number went up, my hook went up. And what it was, and I always prioritized it going into a big super match or a tournament, and that's gym or whatever. You have a preacher Scott uh, curl table, a preacher table, and you take a, at the time I would take a 120 or 130, and you know you drive your elbow inside so it's nice and comfy. You're basically getting the simulation of where your elbow would be in conjunction to your body and your trunk on a table. So height and everything and comfort level. And then I'll slowly drop it into a negative contraction. And then when it comes into my lock area, I'd have a 6 second hold. And I mean, my face turns red and I'm fucking, you know, doing everything I can to withstand it. And then when it opens up to almost a pin, I shut it down, or even before that. And then I go to the left arm. Um, and that was my go-to exercise to test my absolute tensile strength of my hook, my locking strength to my right and my left. Um, and this was by far the best thing I ever did for my hook. There's other things that you know I'm a big supporter of chest and interior rotation of the shoulder in hooking. Anyway, so obviously, if my bench went up, if my military press went up, anytime the interior rotation of my shoulder got stronger, regardless of the exercise, it assisted and it supported my hook, but it was not necessarily a direct correlation. But if I hit a PR on my dumbbell hold, or I jumped 10 pounds and held it for the same amount, I knew that going into that next tournament, assuming I had no inflammation and my elbows were healed, that dude, he would have to top roll me, because if it stops, he's not going to pin me. And that was often the case. Um, you know,
Yeah.
and sometimes I would, you know, and sometimes if I thought my stamina was lacking, I would take a 70 and I'd hold it in one arm and I'd do a walk. So I'd hold it in one arm and I just bring it up here and then I'd come down to a lock at 90 degrees and hold it for 10 seconds. And I'm walking, right? It's a fucking semi cardio thing. And then I put it in my left arm and do the same thing. And I would alternate right to left for a 5-click walk. And then if my shoulders or biceps got tired, I'd just do a farmer's walk. I'd hold it to my right, walk 100 yards, put it in my left hand, so my hands and wrist are getting a workout. That's the one thing I did too. If I think I needed stamina, then we're talking gym stuff, because let's be honest, when it comes to preparing for to being the perfect arm wrestler or your perfect version, nothing beats table time with a good partner. There's nothing that beats table time with a smart, non-ego, maniacal partner that can really like knows where to how to, you know, ramp up his tension and ramp, you know, that's so many guys just trying to rip your arm open, but guys that really know you and really good training partners, there's nothing beats that.
Yeah,
um
and you're 100% right on everything you just said was beautiful for training a hook. And what you said too about a training partner, yeah, in an ideal world, if you can get a training partner who's a little bit stronger than you or a level up from you, and they're willing to just work with you, that's the best possible practice or training you can have for arm wrestling. Though the problem with that is it's so hard to find even a good training partner, let alone the perfect one. Like most of the time
yeah,
when I go to practice, guys just want to pin me, and I get it. Like I'm kind of the guy there, or I'm one of the stronger guys. Like if guys get a win on me, it feel I was there when I first started. Like when you start competing with better guys at practice, it makes you feel good. And so I don't blame them for wanting to smash me. But if I'm injured or if I'm slightly compromised from training and guys are just trying to smack me, and there's times where I'll be beat up and guys are still smacking me, like I'm just gonna get hurt. So the lifts you talked about, I think, are amazing. You're talking about basically doing an advanced negative where you get there, you tighten up, and you kind of lean over. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm assuming you're leaning over, your shoulders committed. You're not like this.
Now, two things to consider when you're training for arm wrestling is one is the angle. You have to train in an ideal winning angle. People that do this table curl with their arms wide open, I'm like, good for you. You're training to be better at losing. Like that's all you're doing. It means anyone's going to rip you to 2 inches of the pin, and then you're going to try to hold them off. And if that's your recipe for winning, you're a lifetime amateur, or you're Michael Todd. But anyway, I want one thing at a time. But I don't think you want to train to be good at a quarter inch from the pin line right away. You need to train right, and Devin talks about this. It's the upper 90 degree, and if someone can rip through your upper 90 degree, then have him deal with your lock. But have enough tensile and negative contraction strength for him to have to work like a motherfucker to get you past 40 at 90 degree, and then you're in your locking position. But so I think the first mistake people make is angles, and the second mistake they make is contraction. Unless you're injured or you're looking to rehab or increase dynamic strength opposed to static strength for whatever reason, there's no reason to ever do a positive contraction lift for arm wrestling. Arm wrestling is built in negative contraction, and it's a holding strength. It's not a moving strength. No one moves an arm when they arm wrestle. It locks, and then the body, with that locking point, moves the opponent to a pin, right? So those are the two mistakes most people make. And like you said with the Devon lift, 99% of all people that post lifts are doing it it's ego based. It's not, it's to impress people. It's not objectively made to become better arm wrestlers, which is why amateurs usually do it. You see that all the time. And with that Devon lift, why the fuck? Whenever you talk about small muscle groups rising, pronation, and you're loading with your 1 rep max, you're looking to tear something. We saw this big guy, I forget his name. He was a title contender to beat Levon or to pull Levon, and he did this and he tore his bicep. He was doing a PR, one rep max, hammer strap deal, and he tore his bicep. Like, people are just dummies. They want to impress their idiot friends on Facebook. They want to do these one rep things. And even power lifters that are training for a 1 rep max do not train in the 1 rep max. It's 3 to 4. That's where your growth happens. So, and to answer your question, when it comes to top rolling, it depends on where your weakness or strength is in the top roll. Or do you have a strong riser but lack pronation? Do you have a really good brachialis back pressure but lack wrist? So it's harder to pick one ideal exercise for a top roller. But assuming you're more or less balanced, I still love, for me, is I'll take a 60-pound dumbbell, not with a thick handle, with the typical 1.5-inch handle. I won't put a fat grip, and I'll raise it and I'll drop it just like either on a preacher bench or not, and I'll hold it and I'll let it come down slowly to the 90, and then at the 90 I'll let it slowly fatigue me, and as it opens up, I shift to the other arm or I take a break, and it's doing two things. It's working my riser and my brac, the two major components in top rolling. I think pronation is somewhat overrated, because if your riser and back pressure can dominate your opponent, pronation means nothing, because you can pronate. If you gain north-south of the table, if you and I are pulling, and you through back pressure and riser can take me 2 inches off center towards your side, there's no cup in the world I can have, or lack of pronation you can't have, that you will not open me up with time. And I mean short time, not a minute, because I'm open and you're tight. Now, if I have 200% more side pressure than you, it could be a match. But assuming everything is equal, if you gain the north-south side of the table,
training for a close match.
You're right. You're not training for what the guy has, like, or you have 200% more side pressure, because that negates everything. We're talking everything being equal. But I think, if you have a huge hand, the rising needs to be important. If you have a small hand, the rising still needs to be important. But rising comes from 2 points, just like side pressure comes from 2 points of impact. Side pressure comes from the elbow, which is the weld, and it also comes from interior rotation of the delt. Those are your 2 points of impacts of side pressure. And with top rolling, it's your brack, somewhat supported by the lat, especially in the strap, and then it's your riser. Pronation is a big factor, but if you and I are pulling and you get me off center, and I have great pronation, let's say theoretically, and you get me 2 inches to your side of the table, and I'm open and you're tight, do you think I'm going to pronate your wrist? Do you think I'm going to pronate your flexor if I'm open and you're close, everything being equal? Fuck no. You're just going to hold me off, and you're eventually going to flop me, or you're going to slowly take me to the pin.
Yeah.
So pronation is somewhat overrated. Not rising. Rising is massive. The ability to keep your knuckles high. Yeah.
Yeah. I think pronation's overrated it sounds strange, overrated in the top roll, because everyone sees like this is supinating for a hook, but it's overrated because so many refs let you start. They won't let you start supinating. They'll let you start like this though.
Yeah.
So your pronator is totally locked, and then you can just go.
Yeah.
But in the top roll, if you have that crazy back pressure like you're talking about, and you bump someone, you don't have to fully pronate through them. But in a hook, like if we're in a center hook and my pronation in a hook is stronger, that's a nightmare for you.
Yes.
Pronation through the hook is a nightmare.
But you also have full flexion at this point. We're talking
right
top rolling. We're talking top rolling. Yeah. Arsene Liliev is a perfect example of. I'm not saying he didn't have a great pronator. Who gives a shit, because he owned the north-south with rising and back pressure with his lat.
He would just rip you open. Yeah.
But he had tremendous rising coming out of his top knuckle with a small hand. He had an incredibly short forearm with a strong upper arm and back lower lat. So he was able to drag everyone to his side, and a riser that never gave out. And when you add a strap to that equation, he takes anyone he wants and he rolls them back at will. And I don't think he was that. If you asked him, I don't know if he was that focused on pronation. Who gives a shit? Because if you can own 3 inches of your side of the table in a strap and the guy can't budge, you're gonna pronate even if you've never tried. You're gonna be able to ultimately pronate as he fatigues, even if you've never trained pronation.
Yeah, just by knocking him so far out of position.
Right, and he's gonna struggle just to contain. And of course, if he's Todd Hutchins and the other one is, Joe T-shirt, it doesn't matter. Todd will go through them. But we're talking apples and apples, oranges and oranges. So for me, it's that hammer curl or hammer static. Everything's a static. There's no curling, and with emphasis on the riser, but as one unit. Like, I don't believe in training your riser independently. Just like I don't believe in doing a super hard 120-pound hammer curl where your wrist gets opened, because who gives a shit how much you can hammer curl if your riser drops? It means everyone's going to go over your fucking hand. Oh, but you could tell your buddies you can hammer curl 130. Who gives a shit? It's not usable in a match versus an elite puller. It's not usable. So who gives a fuck? So those would be my two answers. But I actually thought about that a couple weeks ago, and if I can only pick one exercise for an arm wrestler, just one exercise, or for one human being that's focusing on arm wrestling, but also general core strength and everything, what is one basic exercise for that one guy who's trying to be a good arm wrestler, but also be a balanced, strong, general dude? It's pegboard. Yeah. If you can pegboard, and it's pound for pound, you can't be a fat slob in pegboard, but pegboarding forces your hands to be strong because you have to support your whole body. It forces you to stay at a 90-degree angle. It forces your elbow to stay close to your lat, and everything's operating at a 90-degree, assuming you're training. So I mean, when I do, I have that built in my deck, and when I'm able to stay on that and do like multiple reps and stay at that 90-degree angle, then when I come down on a negative contraction, I hold and I release my left arm and I hold my body in that 90-degree with my arm locked, and it's burning the elbow, the lat, and then it releases. Then I grab the left and I do the same, and it's a heavy duty negative contraction. And the next day, my fucking abs are killing me, my core, my rear delts, my traps, my brack, of course, my bicep, my wrist. Like, that is an amazing overall. Same with rope climbing. Rope climbing, I can say, would be the same thing with a thick rope. It targets everything we want to be strong in arm wrestling, and it also targets like balance, pound for pound. Like you want to have low body composition, obviously, and it hits core.
Yeah. I'm going to address multiple things that we talked about the past few minutes, but I think you're right on the money. pegboard. If I had just two exercises in general for arm wrestlers, it would be pegboard like you're talking about, and you can alternate with fat grip or no fat grip, and then
Mhm.
also like a bent over row or a cable row where you can just pull it. You can do it one handed if you want, pull it and hold it while it's opposing you straight away. Those would be two holds, pegboard like that and that. I think if you get really strong in those two angles, no one's busting your wrist, and then they won't open your arm. They both
Yeah,
train your back, your bicep, your shoulders, your hand, they train everything. So if you only had two, doing those two angles, and you can do heavy weight on those because you're training so many
for
muscle groups.
sure.
It's more of a compound movement as opposed to an
Yeah,
isolation.
yeah,
The only drawback for that is these are all we're making broad statements when arm wrestling is such an individual sport based on who you are, where you're at that time. Like you just talked about not wanting to do isolation, like concentric and eccentric movements for arm wrestling. My right elbow has been fucked up for the past year, and my left arm is kind of on and I've always hurt. I can barely train it. I'll go to an event, arm wrestle with it, it's hurt, and then I can basically rehab it and go pull to the next event. I've been doing for at least the past year strictly hammer curls, strict, supinated curls, strict. I'll go heavy, but heavy is like I see some guys doing crazy fucking weight where they're just jerking it up. For me, I have to be able to do it and then control it on the way down,
yeah.
and then control it on the way down. If it just rips me open, I don't even count it and I'll go down.
No, no, no. Yeah,
That has helped me heal my arms. And this is coming from a person who's more dealing with long injuries from years of competing. It's helped me. Like it used to just, when I first started doing the supinated curls again, like strict supinated, it would kill my wrist, my elbow to even turn the weight. And it's gotten to a point now where I've made gains in it. And it doesn't, not only does it not hurt anymore, I'm getting strong in these angles again. So I think
mhm.
sometimes when you've been arm wrestling for a while, or if you've been practicing a ton and you're beat up, just switch to a more blood flow style workout until you're healthy again,
Yeah,
and then you can make gains. It's not
But-
ideal. It's definitely
yeah,
not ideal. It's not making me a much better arm wrestler, but it's making it where I can still compete. Because if I was
yeah,
trying to train hard, the workouts you were talking about were beautiful, where you're containing the angle and you're going to a 90 because it's training your tendons so much. But if your tendons are injured, you can't
yeah.
redline.
There's no exercise that doesn't have a place in arm wrestling, but the smart people know when when to use certain exercises.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we're talking about ideal exercises. And when someone at practice comes up to me and says, "Hey, is this exercise good?" My first question to them is, when you lose a match, where you have whenever any arm wrestler with anything needs to know where their weaknesses are. So when I ask the guy, "Where's your weakness?" When you lose a match, what is the weakness? And he tells me, is it arm based? Is it wrist based? If it's hand and wrist based, everything you have to do has to be a fat grip. Okay, because let's get the match to your arm. And and if it's you always have hand control, but you keep getting ripped open, you don't need a fat grip. You need to fucking load on the arms. So people don't like to always work their weaknesses. They always rather really focus on their strengths because that's what impresses other people and that's what glorifies your ego. But truly objective, focused athletes will bridge the gap of their weaknesses because you know, you know, there are exceptions. Like Todd's not worried too much on his weaknesses. He's just really trying to revamp his strengths. But at that level, you know, um, he's the strongest in the world, pound for pound, in the angle that he chooses to pull in. And you need to be one strong motherfucker to get him out of it. So there are certain exceptions, but generally, you want to know where you're weak and or why you're losing, and prevent people from exploiting that.
Yeah, that's the best advice you can give anybody with arm wrestling training is because it's such an individual sport. Like there's broad exercises that will apply to anyone and help you in some way or another, but it might not help you specifically stop losing. Which the goal is to
Yeah,
win. You want to win. You want
yeah,
to get strong, and you have to train your weaknesses. Like if because once let's say you're an elite puller, you're an elite top roller, crazy wrist, crazy hand, you're busting everybody open. Someone's gonna grab you low someday and just let you have all that wrist. They're gonna rip your arm open. And
mm-hmm.
once someone sees that, everyone else is gonna start doing that. They're gonna force you to get stronger in your weak lanes. And
Mm-hmm.
even myself, when training while injured, how I can't do like a lot of the stuff I like to do is wrist based curls, like pronation curls or back pressure curls. I haven't been able to do that, so I've been doing these bullshit bodybuilder style curls. But I can
That's
train my
fine.
yeah, and I can
Yeah.
still train my. I don't want to leave my wrist behind because it's not getting activated. So I'll like stabilize it and I'll turn a sledgehammer. Like I can
Yeah.
turn a sledgehammer and that's fine. And it feels great, really. Like my wrist is probably still getting stronger, even though it's not all getting
Yeah.
synced up. Because arm wrestling is like a chain. Like your arm's a chain, they're gonna find the weakest link. So when I go to compete, like my elbow's the problem right now, it's probably still not gonna hold up. But once it heals, at least my wrists won't have fallen behind because I've still been training it through other
Yeah.
facets. So even if you're hurt, you got to find a way to train everything, and you constantly have to train your weaknesses. You cannot leave something lagging just because you don't like to do it. If you know it's a weakness,
Yeah.
you have to train it.
Yeah. And you can train, you cannot increase dynamic and static strength at the same time unless you're incredibly green and never really worked out. So at a certain point, when your elbows feel healthy, you try to strengthen your static holding strength. And when you have inflammation in your tendons in your elbows, you do higher reps and you try to train your dynamic strength. Although the tendons are more important than the muscles support the tendon. And if there's two versions of you and you're identical strength and everything, but one version of you has 5% more dynamic bicep strength, that guy's going to win. So there is place for dynamic strength. The key again is exhaust the static, and when you're plateaued or you're injured or you have inflammation, it's not, oh fuck, I can't really train. You're fucking right, you can train. You can increase your dynamic, which will in turn increase the capacity of your static to load. Right, the two work kind of like symbiotically, albeit the tendon holds a bigger value.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, and I already knew I would anyway before we talked about this because you're a smart motherfucker. But the main thing with lifting, what we haven't really touched on, we've shown like angles. You have to use if you're not using a pulley system that's pulling you directly at certain angles, you have to use gravity. People
Mm-hmm.
that do these lifts with these free weights and they have a belt looped around the back of their hand and the belt's just going vertically down their forearm, you're not lifting it. You're like, yeah, your forearm, like my forearm bone could probably support like 500 pounds before it just gets crushed. But
Yeah.
that's not helping you for arm. You have to use, if you're using gravity as your fighting force, you have to go to an angle where gravity is actually
Yeah.
pulling on.
Yeah. One of the biggest turning points in my career was I was doing this static bicep curl, and I got to the point where I was holding like 150. Like it was just, but I was holding it maybe for 3 seconds, and I thought, my God, I'm the strongest fucker on earth. And then I watched Devin do this exercise where this is 2009 maybe, and he'd grab a dumbbell and he'd hold it tight and he'd go off the preacher bench all the way till his body was parallel to the ground, keep his angle, and come back up. And I'm like, let me try that with my 150. No. Okay. Let me
Yeah.
try that with 130. No. Let me try that with 100. No, it's opening. I had to go down to like 60 fucking pounds, actually, 40 with my right, 60 with my left. So I can go all the way down, keep about an 8-inch gap between my chin and the dumbbell, all the way to the bottom and bring it all the way up. And then I said, what would happen? And I was so weak. What would happen if I spend 5 weeks just focusing on that and increasing it? So all I did was try to increase that, and it was ugly. And all of a sudden it went to like 65, 70. Then the right went to 45, 50. And I added about, I would say 25% on both. And then I took a week off and I said, now let's go back. And I barely didn't feel the 150. Just by changing the angle, and I was able to increase my capacity for a heavier lift. But that was a big turning point for me. Lower the weight, make the angle harder. And it also makes it's easier on the elbow because you're not loading 150 on the elbow. You're taking a lot less weight. That's giving you as much impact on the, I wouldn't say the tendon, but well, on the tendon too. But it's not driving through your elbow because it's not an incredible weight. But you're creating tension and resistance nevertheless in a tighter angle, which ironically makes you, well, not ironically, it makes you better at the table, right? Because now all of a sudden my lock is boom right here. It's not boom. But I realized I'm not training to impress people in the gym with how much weight I can hold. I'm trying to become a better, more proficient hooker. So that was a big turning point for me when I watched this video and then I implemented it.
Yeah, the weights don't mean as much when they're not applied properly. Like that, I see people
Right.
do crazy lifts all the time, and it's like I will never touch that lift. I'll never do. I won't even attempt that lift because I know it's stupid.
Yeah.
But then if you and I grip up, like you can say all these crazy numbers, but if I just stonewall you and hold you,
Yeah.
what does your lift really mean? You know, your lift has
Yeah.
to be the proper angle. It has to be fighting you in an arm wrestling motion. Like it's so hard to train too for arm wrestling, like the way that I limited you here by saying 2 exercises, because arm wrestling is a sport you're going to get attacked at all angles, multiple angles. You're pulling a human being, you're not pulling a weight. So getting really strong one specific angle, like, okay, you might hit the weight here to all the way to here sideways, but a human being, a smart human being who's an arm wrestler, isn't going to just ride that hit. They're going to rip you back. They're not going to keep holding on to that freight train. So,
Also,
let's go here. One more. Circle back around to what you said. The best thing you can do is find a good partner. And
that's right.
The best thing you can do is, if you're the strongest guy at your practice, become a good partner. Still get your work in. If you're way stronger than everybody, hook a band around your hand, work your ass off till you're tired, get your work in, get your red line angles and your strength in, and then let other guys work with you.
Yeah.
Because you still have to get your work in, but you have to work in angles that everybody gets better.
Yeah. I remember pulling with a guy, and he was about 350, and we would pull. And at the beginning, I can give him a little bit of a match, but then he would beat me. And then he got better and better. And then a couple months later at practice, he's like, "God, Chris, why are we even pulling? You can't beat me." He says, "No one's giving me a workout. I should just go in the gym and not work out." I said, "You think so?" I said, "You like pain?" He's like, "Well, I like to work out." I said, "We'll see." So I said, "We're going to grip up in a hook. Okay. And I'm going to force. And you can force too, but you cannot pin me for 15 seconds. You do whatever the fuck you want. We have to stay within the 10 to 2 o'clock. You can do whatever you want. You got to stay in my hook." He was a hooker, but you can't pin me. No problem. So 15 seconds, I drive right through his wrist, and he's holding me off, and he can't pin me. So he's emptying the tank. At 15 seconds, I go, "Okay, now pin me." I stopped him. Now we're in a war. And then he releases. He says, "I see your point." I said, "No, now work, motherfucker. Work."
Yeah.
Like now, like work. Like, if you're scared that no one's can make you work in a practice, you're not smart enough, or the people around you are not willing to adapt. But in the last couple of years that I trained with a team, going back to last year, I have zero tolerance. So I made a little bit of a comeback last year. I'll go to a practice in Montreal, and of course, guys know my name, but they haven't seen me in a few years. So what do they think? They're trying to rip my arm off. And so I'm okay with, you want to see where you are. I'm an ego guy. I'm a competitive guy. You want to go, let's go. Now I'm going to pin you. You want to do it again, fine. Now you know I'm stronger than you. Get the fuck off the table. Next guy comes. I said, now you get it out of your system. And so at a certain point, I'm like, okay, now I need to train. We've had like 10 ready goes, or now it's time for me to train what I want to train. And so I grip a guy, and he's trying to do something. I said, "No, try to help me with this." And he still tried to beat me. I said, "Get the fuck off. Go, fuck off." And then he circled around 10 minutes later. He said, "You want to pull?" I said, "I'll never pull you again until you smarten the fuck up. Like, you're doing nothing for me or nothing for you." And your approach to training is what's going to make you a career loser. And I can explain it to you in more detail if you want, and then you just walk away. But if you cannot adapt to help yourself or adapt to help the person in front of you, if you can't do either of those things and all you want to do is win by any means necessary, you're a fucking loser. And I'll tell you that. Get the fuck off my table. And I remember working with this guy was super weak. Like, it was his third practice, and he was like 140, and everyone was going through him. And everyone was just going through him, and no one. And I said, let's work. And where are you most comfortable? And okay, you got to be safe. And I told him how to pull safe. But him and I just worked, and I'd let him, like, you have to be able to work with people and ignore the ego. And if you fucking can't do that with me, you have no place in my world. I won't invite you to my practice if I have a practice. And if it's not my practice, I won't put my elbow on the pad with you. Unless you want to see who's better, and then we put $50 and then I'll fucking smash you and then embarrass you and then you give me $50. But if it's objective training, I can't stand people like that. I dealt with them in my first like 10, 12 years, but in my last few, I have no tolerance for that shit. And especially in the last few years, I dealt with a lot of elbow inflammation. So I tell someone, okay, like, do this, but don't do this. And then or don't hit me with speed. When I ask someone not to hit me with speed and then they hit me with speed, I'm not a happy guy, and it never happens again. Like I said, if you're not here to help me, get the fuck off my table. And if you're asking me for help, no problem, I'll help you. But either you're trying to help me or you're trying to help yourself, and by getting better, not by patting his ego. But those are some awesome practices where you have just people working together. And you and I, despite you probably being stronger than me, you and I can have a one-on-one on a table for a half hour, 45 minutes, and we can both benefit. This can happen. But both people have to be adaptable and not fucking be ego jockeys. Like, you got to be, but
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
100%. And most of the time when I come to practice, I'm already compromised because I'm lifting with Kelly and the kids. I lift a lot. So when I come to practice, I probably just lifted the day before or 2 days
Yeah.
before or 2 days in a row before. So I'm totally fine with not even pinning anybody, just holding, getting blood flow, getting work in. But like, let's say I'm totally fresh, healthy. I'm training for something big and I'm trying to redline. I still don't need to just smash people. I don't get anything out of smashing someone. If I really want to redline, I want you to hold me. I want you to use an
Yeah.
extra finger. I want you to put a band. Then I'll redline. And then once I get
Yeah.
tired, I'll rest for a second. Then I'll keep working. I don't need to pin someone to get stronger. I just need
Yeah.
someone to hold my hand and allow me to work pressures.
Yeah.
And
Here's an interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
you're go
No,
ahead, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
You're good.
Here's an interesting thing. If you wanted to arm wrestle with someone and your sole goal was to obviously get stronger, but more specifically, it was to release high levels of hormone through metabolic stressor. So incredible, like CrossFit type compound nervous stress your nervous system type. Would you want to take a guy and struggle to pin him, or would you want to get mega fucking tight and have him, once you're settled and giving everything you have him open you up slowly and pin you? It's the latter. Because it's only when you're completely locked in and someone slowly opens you up where everything's fucking all in. Pinning requires. I'm not saying if you're pinning someone, but so many things have to happen for you when you go to pin someone. Their strength level, where you're giving absolute every ounce of your nervous system, and it's like a 12-second process. Most likely, it's going to be a 3-second process, or you're not going to pin them. But when you want someone to open up your angle, you just need a stronger guy who's using a little bit of calculated resistance. Like you can do this with me. Devin can do it with you, but it just takes a stronger guy willing to slowly open you up, so it can be calculated. It's a little bit more easily to gauge. But I find when I do that, my elbow has to be incredibly healed to do this. But when I do this, the next day I feel fucking fantastic. Like the
Oh yeah.
pec, the front delt, like everything is fucking red.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
that's the best training
um,
there is. Just a controlled,
yeah,
educated training. And
yeah.
you need to train fast starts too. This isn't to negate the
No, no,
you need to train hits. You need to have the ability to be able to sync your move. You need to train fast starts, but fast starts almost require an even higher IQ than
yeah,
slow pulling with someone because you need to have
yeah,
either a person willing to absorb the hit or you have to have two people who are similar level trying to hit each other. You need a ref. Like this is a whole different scenario.
yeah,
Because if you want to
yeah,
really train fast starts, you need a ref. You need two people that are somewhat of a close match because your fast hits and your starts. If you're not just training your nervous system, if you're training them specifically for a match, you need someone similar caliber to you. Because if you're training your fast starts to blow through bumps, who gives a fuck? Like you're always going to blow through bumps. So you need to practice your fast hits against someone else who's either catching or hitting an equal strength. But you got to train everything and fast starts,
yeah,
slow pulls, train them smart, get
yeah,
with someone who can help you and is willing to work with you. Stay away from ego assholes at practice who only want to pin everybody. Like they'll weed themselves out. Those guys will quit coming too. Most of the ego assholes I've ever
yeah.
seen, they stop coming. Like what they get injured or they get their ego crushed. Those guys don't last, honestly. So
Mhm, mhm, yeah.
and th- uh, since we've talked about training for a while, and we talked about different training techniques from go to multiple people. This is a question I wanted to ask you too for a while, and you can label it however you want to. Your description can be your description, and your variables are your variables. Who is the greatest arm wrestler of all time to date, in your opinion?
Okay. For me, there's no question. Obviously, the go-to answer for most people is John Brzenk, but it's not John. The best arm, and I don't even like this guy. Well, of course I respect him, but him and I have had issues. But the best arm wrestler to ever arm wrestle professionally is Engin Terzi. Okay, and for me, it's not even close. It's not Devin. It's not John. It's Engin Terzi. He started off as a weak guy. He was not strong. He had to, much like Corey Miller. Corey Miller was not strong. He had to learn how to be fast, technical angles, and then when he got stronger, he became mega elite. But Engen kind of followed the same path on a higher level and has he doesn't get the same recognition because he was a lightweight than a middleweight. But um, if you're talking about the pound for pound, the best arm wrestler to ever live in terms of his cerebral capacity, his ability to adapt, his ability to apply what he's learned to get himself stronger, and then have it tangibly seen in results at the highest tournament possible, it's Engin Terzi. It's not even
Yeah.
close.
No,
It's not even
I
close.
I agree with you in the aspect of Ingen is the highest IQ, most cerebral, best at training, probably the best trainer if he decided to start training people. He's the guy you want to take the most advice from because, and most people don't know this because they just see him as a promoter now, but Ingen was a monster, especially at a lower weight class. But he could pull, what did he win? 5 different weight classes? World championships?
Yeah,
4 or 5.
yeah.
Like, but his titles, his accolades are insane. Probably the smartest, highest IQ, most cerebral for
Yeah.
training arm wrestling ability for sure. I wouldn't
And,
have him as my greatest of all time, but again, this depends on what you're. I wouldn't have him as my pound for pound goat either. I would still have John above him pound for pound
yeah,
because John was a 200-pound guy banging
yeah,
out with massive human
yeah.
beings, and the level of competition John was beating isn't the same as it is now, which is also why I wouldn't have John as my GOAT either. John Brzezinski had the greatest career, the greatest run, like the most. He's like the Wayne Gretzky, where he had his accolades no one will ever touch, no one will ever do what John did. But if I'm just saying who I think is the greatest arm wrestler of all time right now, I think it's Levon. I think Levon right now
Oh,
could
yeah.
beat
Well,
could beat anybody
yeah,
else who's ever arm wrestled.
yeah. If you're talking about the strongest, most formidable arm wrestler to ever put his elbow on the pad, it's Levon. It's unquestionable. We've had this discussion in our first or second episode where I said if a guy comes and he plays with Levon and then quits, he's the GOAT. Like, what do you want? I mean, you needed more than an afternoon, but if you did it in 5 events and played with everyone and then laughed and smiled and quit, he's the GOAT. There's no question. But so I get tied into career. But when I look at Engen compared to John, if you really want to break down, John in the heat of competition was not always the aggressor. John had a dominant hand. John had great anatomy, biology. John had a background. John had a lot of a good base, but John was not a fiery, win at all cost. Uh, his aggression factor wasn't big. Engen, I don't think Engen's ever been in a match where he didn't want it more. He wasn't as the other opponent was more aggressive, ready to fire off. John never, for many years, didn't have to hit because his hand was so dominant. Engen, I think, had never pulled a match where he wasn't the first to react or in the proper angle because he didn't have a choice. So there's so many ways you can define GOAT. We've done it 3 times in the last 5 minutes, and I agree with Levon. And I get caught up in the career and the best I've ever seen in terms of their application and cerebral approach, which is Engen. John's, of course, in the top 2, 3. But if you're talking capacity and the most strength we've ever seen in a strength sport, I'm with you. With Levon is the GOAT. If we're talking capacity of strength or capacity of ability. Um,
Yeah, and that's why the GOAT conversation I think is always so great to debate. And it's so great to hear different people's perspectives on it because your GOAT is defined by what your GOAT terms are.
yeah, yeah,
Do you think it's the most skilled person of all time? Because the most skilled person of all time is it's either going to be Ingen or it's going to be Devin, and I would give it to Ingen.
yeah, yeah,
Ingen's the like you said, he's a fighter. He's skilled. He doesn't have to cheat. It's almost like Ingen is a hand reader instead of a mind reader. He can grip up with people and just knows where he's going to go, knows
yeah,
what he has to do. If you're talking about greatest accolades as far as length of their career and the names they beat, it's John for sure. Like John, and on top
yeah,
of it,
yeah,
John was doing it as a smaller man. He was beating everybody. That's amazing. And if you're talking about it as
yeah,
pure strength, then it's Levon. So it depends on what
yeah,
your definition is.
yeah.
And
Yeah,
for me,
yeah,
when I say greatest, the first thing that comes to mind is who would I bet money on against everybody else? If I'm taking this guy or the field, I'm taking Levon. And I
yeah,
don't. That's the easy way out. That's like the lazy. I think that's the laziest way out because it's much more fun to get into the weeds of who's more technical, who's better pound for pound, who had a better career. I think those are much more fun conversations because very often the strongest guys obvious. Levon's obviously like, and people thought that about Cleve Dean because he was this big 600-pound dude. Levon would fuck Cleve Dean up. Like,
Oh, yeah.
Levon's the obvious strongest arm wrestler. He
Yeah.
just proved it against Devin. Like, it doesn't matter if his hands
Yeah.
bent back. It doesn't matter the angle. And Levon's so strong that his skill gets undermined. He's such a
Yeah.
freak and so strong and so big that people don't recognize the skill he has as well. But he's the strongest for sure.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
And I think it's the first time in sport where a guy has owned the right hand super heavyweight title for maybe a year or two, and he's so far above the rest, he's probably getting bored. Like it's not even like he's like, send me somebody or else I'm gonna start bowling.
He's technically never lost a round
uh,
in super matches.
well, didn't he lose two matches to the I'm fucking terrible with names. The Italian
Hermes?
the glad yeah.
Yeah, that comes down to your definition. If him
Yeah.
quitting and saying I don't want to pull anymore, yeah. Yeah,
And,
if you count him saying I'm done, I already got the dub, I don't want to pull anymore, then yeah, then he forfeited those rounds. But in a match where he's actually trying, he hasn't lost a round yet, which is crazy.
yeah. If you and me sit down and we analyze or interpret a basketball player or a football player or in this case an arm wrestler, it's always my go-to to break down or criticize what they don't have rather than just celebrate what they have, because I mean it's more interesting. And when I see John was never a highly cerebral. He never really, in the time that John dominated, so we're talking the 80s and 90s, he was arm wrestling farmers, bricklayers, strong motherfuckers that didn't have Google and the internet to really, and the evolution of arm wrestling wasn't there. The ability to, the knowledge we have now in terms of nutrition and application and different types of training methods. And I think John, because he started so young and he was so consistent in his training and stayed with it for decades, I think he beat a lot of guys. He dominated the sport because of consistency and a balanced approach. And he was dedicated to arm wrestling more than most.
Yeah, John's the blue collar champion.
Yeah, but the best career ever. And we look at Devin, I see a guy with a longer hand than anyone else and a longer form than anyone else, who has an IQ better than everyone else. And when I see him, I see, why are you cheating? Why do you need to take? So I always look at what they. I always look at the crack in the foundation. And Engen, there's no crack except that he's not a big. If Engen was 240, if Engen was a six, I mean, but he wasn't. He was a 5'8", 130-pound kid who slowly gained weight. But Levon is the strongest arm wrestler we've ever seen. But if you gave him Engen's brain, he would be 30% strong. Not 30%. He'd be 12% stronger. But I just like Engen's brain because Levon's package is impressive, like the whole 400-pound guy. But I mean, he also collapsed because you couldn't breathe during an arm wrestling match. I mean,
yeah, that's
arm wrestling. So I'm not that impressed with him. Because would he be that dominant if he was 255 with a semi six pack? We'll never know. But I see flaws, right? I see weaknesses in Devin and John, in everyone except Engen. The only weakness in Engen is that he wasn't born a full size 226. If you put Engen's soul and brain in RVJ's body, you'd have magic. Unfortunately, genetics don't work that way. But for me, that's why it's Engen, because I can't break anything down with him. There's nothing I can break down with him. He's the perfect athlete.
Yeah. That's why I agree with you 100% about pointing out what people don't have versus, because what you do have is so obvious. All the things you have are so obvious. And all the things you have aren't the fun part about you. Truthfully, the fun part is, what else could you have? What else could you train? What else could you get better? What else could you sharpen? I don't care about how sharp this is. That's what happens if we get this dull thing really sharp. And like the funnest thing for me when it comes to GOAT conversations is, if I was going to just create a maniacal freakazoid human, I'd take Engen's brain, I'd take Levon's frame and strength, I'd take John's blue collar work ethic and constant pulling, broke his arm at 13, stuck with it. Like, it's more fun to create a human, because those are debates you can have. like
Mhm.
specific debates about if we're gonna build this fucking transformer human being arm wrestler, what parts do we want? Whose wrist do we want? Whose bicep do we want? Whose genetics do we want? Like that's more fun to have because you're arguing multiple points and you get to talk more. Goat conversations are fucking boring for me for the most part because it's like, oh, Michael Jordan, oh, like Babe Ruth. If you're a racist white
Nah,
piece of shit, you're gonna say Ty Cobb. Like there's there's a million different ways.
only in Michigan, only in the state of Michigan.
Yeah. So for me, it's much more fun to break things down specifically.
Yeah,
What parts do you want? What, like, yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Analyze the
Because
weakness.
and that's exactly why I love trolling, because there's so much dick sucking and fucking in the world in general on Facebook, that it's just fun to go and just break everyone down and see how they react. And like it's just fun to break everyone down and see like how balanced are you, how confident are you. I had a really good conversation with my sister a couple of weeks ago about confidence. And you have two people that are brought up by their parents with tremendous confidence. Like one the parents are always saying you can do anything you want, you can do anything you want, and this person grows up and they're confident that they can do anything you want. And my argument to her was it's not real confidence. And she's what's real confidence? And I said real confidence is two people have to climb Everest. Both are confident. One person has been told by their parents that they can do anything, so they're confident that they can climb Everest, but they've never climbed the mountain. The other person never got pats on the back by their parents, but actually climbed Kilimanjaro, which is comparable, and is confident. What is real confidence? Confidence is knowing that you've done something similar and kind of achieved it or survived it. So I don't know why I went on a tangent, but I just,
No,
I
it's a
always
great
like,
point.
but I always like, I'm always looking at breaking someone down and highlighting intangibles, because anyone can have genetics, anyone can have a bullshit sense of confidence, anyone can have people patting you on the back and say you can do this, you can do that, but it's all bullshit. It's all bullshit, and I don't like talking about it because it's not stimulating and it doesn't lead to growth. If you and I have a 30-minute conversation on all the things you're good at the end of the conversation, you're not 1% better. You're just going to bed thinking, boy, I'm a good guy. But it's doing you nothing. But if we have a 30-minute conversation, I'm breaking down everything about you as a man that is weak and it can be improved theoretically. You might not love this conversation, but the next day you wake up and if you're any bit of a man, you're like, I got work to do. And in a month, maybe you're 10% better on the things that you struggled with. So, I mean, and if you're like, fuck you, Gabi, we're not going to talk about this, it tells me what kind of man you are. You're not looking to evolve, and you're essentially a coward. Anyway, so I just like the breaking down of people and the intangible qualities. And Engen, like if we broke, you'd want Engen's brain, you'd want Engen's fighting spirit, you'd want Engen's wrist, you'd want Engen's hit, you'd want Engen's timing on refs. Like a lot of the things, if we built a goat from a taking the best out of everyone, I think we'd take 5 things from Engen and maybe 1 from Devin, 2 from John, 1 from Levon, 1 from Todd Hutchins, 1 from RPJ. But we take 5 fucking things from Engen, and that's why Engen's my goat. But goat. If we're talking capacity, you're right. It's Levon. He's the greatest.
No, I think you are right though too about Engen being like he has the most attributes you would want. He was just stuck in the wrong frame.
Right.
He had all the attributes of being the guy, and he was the guy. He was the guy for his era and for his weight class and weight classes even above. He overachieved. Even as great as he was, he even overachieved what he could have done and should have done. Mm-hmm. And now he's the greatest promoter. Like Engen is a human being who's very unique, and they call him the Rage because he's a fired up guy, and you want that. You want that. You want your guy to have that rage. Yeah, you need it. And what you said about confidence too is very interesting too. It's the same way I try to raise my children, and the same way I approach like my own life in a competitive aspect is I think true confidence comes from being willing to whatever your sport is or whatever your challenge is, being willing to go into it and not being afraid of losing. You can't be afraid of losing. You have to stay dedicated and work hard enough to know that you have a chance to win. And even if that chance is 1% or 0.5%, you have to hang on to that and know no matter how unsurmountable this odd is, there's a chance I can do it. And I'm not afraid if I don't get there. I tell my son that all the time when he's wrestling or going to practice. I'm like, dude, train your weaknesses. I know that when you're trying these moves right now, they're not working, but you have to keep trying them and know that someday they will work. And then you'll build confidence with that move that it works. And then you won't be afraid to use it. Confidence is not having fear of the unknown or fear of failure. I'm here. I'm ready. I have my sword and my shield, and I don't care what comes at me. Whether I die or live or lose or win, it doesn't matter. I'm here. I think that's what true confidence is hard work, dedication, no fear.
I'll take that. I'll take that a bit and go with it. And I think that you're right, but I think a lot of that is, you're going to speak scared. Like you can't say don't fear. You're going to fear.
Oh yeah, feeling the fear and facing.
But
yes,
but embrace the fucking fear. Embrace it. Accept it. Go forward, knowing that regardless of what happens, you're a better man tomorrow. You're going to be uncomfortable. You're going to be anxious. It's going to suck. Still do it. Courage is doing what you need to do when you don't want to do it. That's the definition of courage, I think, more or less. So the people that can do this, and there used to be this thing on the back of cars in the 90s, no fear, no fear, no fear. Like, no fear. I want to fear things. Like, don't pretend that you don't fear. That doesn't make you a man. You fear things. If you fear nothing, you're a psychopath. Like, if you don't fear death, if you don't fear pain, like you're not tough. You're a psychopath. We fear things because we embrace certain things and we don't want to lose them. You fear losing your family. You fear losing your job or losing your business. It's good to fear things. Fight to protect it, safeguard it, and move forward despite it. But fear is a natural feeling. Like it's a reaction or the decision you make consciously after the fear. Do you hide under a bed or do you move forward despite the fear?
Yeah,
fear is fine.
Yeah, and if fear gets a lot of labels too. Anxiety, like some people get depressed when they're afraid of something or they're worried about something's going to happen. But yeah, you have to embrace it. And like when I say not to be afraid, that's my meaning is you're still going to feel those feelings. You're still going to get anxious. You're still going to get sweaty palms. You're still going to have this weird energy. But you have to find a way to calm the storm and go out and handle your business. And if you do everything you can and you lose, who gives a fuck? Yeah. Like, I've got 2 matches on Saturday. If I lose them both, I don't care. My family's still going to love me. I don't give a fuck. I'm probably the underdog in both matches, and I'll probably still win both. I don't care. Like, I'm fine with that. And right before the match, am I going to have those feelings of anxiety and anxiousness? And, God, I want to beat this motherfucker. Of course. I don't want to lose. Yeah. Nobody wants to lose, but you still have to give everything you have. You can't lose because of the fear.
Yeah, I remember being at a tournament and my guy I was training with, he says, I said, I'm going to go in the parking lot and throw up. And he says, you do that often? I said, not always, but a lot of guys in here want to beat me today. And I didn't have a great week of rest and I don't feel great. My elbows hurt. I didn't sleep last night. I dieted to lose weight. He says, so you don't think you're going to have a good day? I said, I'll probably have a great day because it's usually when things like this come into play, my adrenals kick in. I know I can't fuck around. So the adrenal factors come in. There's a great scene in a Batman movie with Christian Bale where he's deep in a cavern and he's got to climb out. But every time he tries to climb out, people try and they grab a rope and they climb and they just keep falling. And the rope is like a protective, it's a way that if you fall, they put a rope around the waist. So if you fall and you don't make the climb, you're not dead. You don't drop 200 feet. You're just badly hurt. So he says to the guy, I said, I can't make the climb. And one of the fucking spiritual guys around him says, well, because you don't fear. He says, I have no fear. He says, that's the problem. If you want to make the climb, you have to fear your own. You have to fear not being able to get out. He says, how do I do that?
Take the safety off.
Yeah, and then he got up there, and let me tell you, his heart was 250 beats a minute, and adrenals kicked in, and adrenals are an amazing goddamn chemical, and it made him make the jump because if he didn't, there's no mulligan, you're fucking dust. Yeah. So fear is an amazing weapon. Fucking use it.
Yeah, No, that's great advice. That's great life advice. No matter if it's a sport or, like you said, like if you're scared of losing a business, you're scared of losing you're scared of losing your wife or a relationship. Well, fucking work for it. Put the time in, protect it, do what you need to do.
Yeah, there was another movie with Kurt Russell called Soldier back in the mid '90s, and he joins this fucking.
Oh yeah, I remember that. They get like juiced up and making new models and stuff.
Yeah, and they say, what do you believe in? He says, fear and discipline. Fear and discipline. And I'm thinking, why fear? Like, why would a soldier say fear? Because that's what like keeps him on his edge. Like, you have to fear shit. You have to fear, and you go forward knowing that like it cannot um it cannot lead how you do things or prevent you from doing certain things. But fear is a weapon, and discipline is the control. So fear is him realizing that at any given mistake he makes can be the end of him. But that discipline is pushing himself through those thresholds. So that's why fear and discipline work very well together. Fear and being a coward, not so much. But fear and discipline, fear and control, amazing. Control and confidence, or would not work out so well. But those two things, and it took me like a long time to process. It was a fucking movie, who cares? But process those words, and it's like, I get it. You want to fear and you want to be disciplined. You want both.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go back and watch that movie. I remember that's like you unlocked like a fucking core memory. He's got like the crew cut, and they've got like tattoos.
Yeah.
And like the newer version, like whoops his ass in the training, like out trains him. But I'm gonna have to go back and watch that.
Yeah. They're doing a 5-mile run, and he's like on pace to like do it, but he's doing like a run, but he's not. And then they said, and they had this. What was his name? It was an Asian actor, Scott something, and he played Bruce Lee in one of the earlier movies. Anyway, so Kurt Russell starts going, and he's been going for like 20 minutes. And they said to the other, okay, now your turn. And the guy just flies out, full out sprint, passes the guy and beats him, despite like giving the guy a 2-mile thing. And then they come across the other end, and Kurt Russell's lieutenant says, yeah, but my guy finished second, but he still has energy to fight. And the other guy didn't have a bead of sweat on him. Right? It's like the other guy can fight too. Like the other guy was just a superior physical athlete. But
I remember that scene. Yeah. That's the only scene I remember.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go back and watch that though. It is called.
That's a good movie, man. Yeah, 1994, 1995, good movie, man. At the time, it was a great movie. Now it's probably cheesy as fuck, but at the time, it was a good movie. Dude, I mean, they do some combat on ropes, like they climb a rope and they have to fight at the top of a rope.
Yeah,
like,
I remember that too.
And it was Jason Scott Lee. That was a Jason Scott Lee. So they all the soldiers climb the rope with their, like CrossFitters do, with their arms and their legs intertwined to help them get up the rope. And Jason Scott Lee just goes, like, boom, 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 like motherfucker. But I was like, that dude's got some strong arms and hands. Like, Jesus,
dude, I love cheesy movies. I go down a whole rabbit hole of cheesy movies, especially cheesy Kurt Russell movies. Big Trouble in Little China. Fuck, I love. Jack
great
Burton's
one-liners.
a classic character. We'll have to do that. We'll tackle that. We'll do fucking movies, cheesy movies, horror movies, comedies, whatever. We'll do that on the next episode. But this has been a real good one, man. Thank you again for your time and the conversation. Good talk, brother.
You know what, man? Yeah, and it was a good episode for me because I promised my mom I wouldn't out a tranny or a homosexual this episode. So I've done it. I can't for the next episode. I can't promise anything, but I've been good on this one.
You made Mama proud for one more week.
Yeah.
Well, there's always next week. All right. We'll see you then, brother.
Later, buddy.
Spartacus Project Podcast.